The story I've got to tell you involves a friend of mine, and it happened about 45 years ago. The person involved had been an instructor at the Aero Club here for a short time, and then went into a job working for a mining company. He wasn't with them for more than about 3 months when this incident took place. I became aware of it on a Saturday morning when I was on the premises at the Aero Club here, and this friend of mine walked through the front door, and I said, "Oh, hi, how's it going?" And he said, "Not too good." And I said, "Why?" He said, "I'm in trouble, right up to here." And I said, "What's gone wrong?" He said, "Oh, dear God." He said, I've come here for a cup of coffee. Can I sit down and have a talk to you?" So we sat down and had a talk. What had actually happened was he'd been up north and he's flying down the coast to get back to Jandakot on a Friday afternoon. He spent a fair bit of time up north and always looked forward to getting back to Perth for a weekend if he could. And so he overflew Geraldton on his way down. He got as far as Lancelin, and it was there that he got the message that both Perth and Jandakot were closed due to weather. And so he thought to himself, well, what do I do? I want to be in Perth for the weekend. I'm not going back to Geraldton, that's 3/4 of an hour back to there. And there's nowhere else to go. And then he remembered there was an old disused strip near Lancelin. And he thought, oh, well, I'll put him there. So off he went to this little strip. It was only a couple of miles out of Lancelin. And he wasn't aware of the fact that there'd been rain bucketing down in Lancelin, and this old strip was not an all-weather strip. And so when he touched down, mud flew everywhere, and the aircraft decelerated at an alarming rate, came to a stop, bogged on the strip. He couldn't taxi. He was there with real problems. So he got out and wandered around, and he thought, well, what am I going to do? And then he looked at the situation and thought to himself, if I don't get a lot of sun in the next week and a lot of wind, I'm going to still be here. The company's not going to be very happy about this. In fact, they may have to come up here and dismantle the aircraft and take it away. And so he's telling me this story, and I'm going, yeah. And he said, and then, to my surprise, I heard a vehicle arriving. And it was a Land Rover. And a bloke pulled up in the Land Rover and he said, we don't see many aeroplanes around here these days. And he said, well, I wish you hadn't seen this one. So they had a bit of a wongi, and the man with the Land Rover said, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I want to get it out of here, and the best place would be on the road. So with a bit of bushcraft and bushwhacking, the man was a fisherman. He had ropes all in the back of his ute. So they tied the aircraft onto the back of the ute, and between the two of them they manipulated over a reasonable period of time onto the road. And the fisherman said, what are you going to do with it now? And he said, I'll find a little place where I can back it off the road and leave it there overnight. So they towed it for a little distance, and there was nowhere to park it. So another conflab will disconnect the ropes, and the aeroplane can taxi on its power, and the Land Rover can go ahead. So they proceeded in that fashion for a short distance, and lo and behold, up behind them came the police car. The policeman reckoned they should stop for a wongi. So when they told the policeman what idea they had in mind of finding a place to park the aircraft, he said, well, there's nowhere on this road where you can park an aircraft. He said, but I'll tell you what, why don't we go into town? There's a little street there. It hasn't got any houses in it, and it'd be a nice place to leave your aircraft overnight. So he said, oh, that's a good idea. So with the police car out in front with the lights going and the Land Rover at the back and the aircraft with rotating beacon, landing lights and nav lights on, the whole procession moved into town. The aeroplane got parked in this little quiet street quite close to the hotel. So he's working things away with the, no, you can't tell what's happening. He worked things out with the policeman that the weather wasn't going to improve, the day was getting long, and they should get their heads together at 7 o'clock the next morning. The policeman would cut off the road at one end, send his assistant down the highway a little bit, and he'd be able to get airborne if the weather was good. I'd set the time for 7 o'clock. So my friend heads off to the hotel, which is only a few paces away, and lo and behold, another aeroplane appears over Lancelin, circles, and then lines up on the little bit of street where he's parked his aeroplane. So my friend who wanted to be anonymous because he's still in the aviation industry, so I'm calling him my friend instead of his real name, took off from the hotel waving his arms, go away, go away, go away. But the person flying the Cessna 182, similar to that one there, not that one, landed on this little section of street, put on his brakes, skidded, and used up the whole of the street and a little bit more. So by this time my friend got over to the aircraft and this bloke steps out and he says, geez, you must be able to fly that 337 all right. He said, silly bugger, I landed 2 miles away. So they spent the night at the hotel, and the next morning at 7 o'clock, the policeman, true to his word, appeared. They closed a section of road and both aircraft disappeared. The Cessna 182 went back to Perth Airport, which is its normal home, and the Cessna 337, the twin-engine one, arrived here at Jandakot at about 8:15, and it was very soon after that that he walked through the door here at the Aero Club, and when I had my conversation with him. So throughout the conversation, he said, oh, I don't know what I'll do. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, you know how rumours get magnified and stories get bigger and bigger and better, and it only takes a week for this to really turn into something else. You might be better off to get yourself into the Department of Civil Aviation first thing on Monday morning and tell them exactly what happened, but emphasise the safety angle and talk about the role that the police played in it, because that will soften the blow. So sure enough, he went in at 9 o'clock, was admitted to the department, and got to the office of the person who looked into incidents and accidents. And this person looked over his glasses and said, oh, good morning. How you going? You come to tell me about Lancelin, have you? So they sat down and had a talk for about 3/4 of an hour to an hour, and emphasised, as I said, the aspect of the police being involved and the safety angle. And finally, the investigator said, well, I think you've done everything you possibly can. How about we just close the book on it? So that was the end of the story, and he was a happy man. He then moved over east, and I didn't see him for 40 years, over 40 years. He was in Perth about 2 years ago, and we ran into each other and we had lunch together, and we raked over the coals. We talked about this particular incident for the whole of lunch, and we had a really marvellous time. And he returned to Perth about 3 weeks ago, and we had coffee together, and we raked over the coals again. So thank you. I thought it was a story worthwhile mentioning. That's a Cessna 337, and that's what Jandakot looked like in those days.